WrestleMania weekend saw some massive heavyweight clashes. We got to see RK Bro taking on Street Profits versus the Alpha Academy. We got to see Pat McAfee versus Austin Theory. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Kevin Owens. There was AJ Styles versus Edge, and of course Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns in a title unification match. However, you're not here for wrestling chitter chatter. You were here for the Midlands Mayhem matchup, the review of Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Aston Villa. And was it going to be an all-time classic with the crowd chanting, "This is awesome"? Or was it going to be one of those one-star ratings that you just want to forget? Either way, join us, because this is Talk of the Trinity.
Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Talk of the Trinity podcast. I am Baz Barrett and I am joined this week with Mr. Trinity himself, Will Forrest, backed by, well, popular or unpopular demands. We'll let the viewers decide, but we are both in the same virtual sphere to bring you all of the fallout from the Wolves away game on Saturday, and also to look forward to Spurs at home on Saturday evening, and throw in our comments about all other things Villa during the course of the hour, as and when they come to mind. This show may be unscripted. We'll let you decide. But in the meantime, to check out some of our other musings, thoughts, ramblings, insights, check us out on our YouTube channel, Talk of the Trinity, also our Twitter page at Talk Trinity, and also our audio podcast channels providers. We've got Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, Deezer. Probably need a cleaner, maybe after a long weekend. And then I think we're also on Fan Hub, where you can join the football community, of which we are just a small part. And whilst you're there checking us out, if you are thoroughly depressed by the prospect of having to listen to us talk about Wolves, you can listen to our Premier League preview for the rest of the season, where we get to be negative about other teams as well, but also positive. And we throw some predictions in terms of relegation, promotion from the Championship, who's going to get those top four places, who's going to win the Premier League, FA Cup, Champions League. So get yourself a cup of something nice. Have a listen to that. My social media manager tells me that the reaction's been good to that podcast so far. So thank you for those who've already listened. Go and check it out. Go and comment, subscribe, let us know your thoughts. But if you want to stick to hear what may be a potentially uncomfortable 20, 30 minutes when we talk about events at Molineux on Saturday, 3 p.m, Wolves 2, Villa 1. Speaking of predictions, if we take nothing else from what happened on Saturday, we recorded our preview Wolves episode separately for scheduling reasons. And the result of that was, we kind of, Mr. Trinity's got a bit of a moniker that he's positive Will and I'm negative Baz. But without that positive influence in my half of the preview, I was overcome by positive emotion, having to make up for Will not being there. And it ended up a situation where I predicted a draw. So, not too positive, they didn't want to risk any medical emergencies happening. So I predicted the draw and Will predicted the result. It was Wolves 2, Villa 1. So moral of the story for our listeners, we need to be in the same place just so we can balance each other out. But in terms of lessons to be learned from Saturday, were there any lessons for you, Will, apart from don't watch 90 minutes of Villa again for the rest of the season, or unless you've got a few alcoholic beverages nearby, because it was a long 90 minutes.
Oh, I think one of the lines of a Rolling Stones song, I wouldn't say a classic, sums it up perfectly. All I hear is doom and gloom. It was, in the words of my stepdad, it was putrid.
Yep.
It was shambolic. It was awful. Who told Ezri Konsa to bring his slip and slide? You know, it was a catalogue of errors for the first goal.
Yep.
I watched the highlights for this one. I listened to it, but I watched the highlights, and they were even worse than I imagined.
Yep.
You know, you're listening to the radio and you hear it going through and you think, oh, that's not good. Oh, that's not good. Oh, that's not good. But then you see it and you think, bloody hell, it's like the Marx Brothers had done the sketch. In the defence of Ashley Young, I felt a bit sorry for him. He was clearly trying to head the ball, but my word, what a goal.
Yep.
Top corner. Pick that one out.
Can't place it better than that.
No. I mean, I listened to your preview after I'd recorded mine, as I mentioned on our last podcast. And I'll be honest with you, I hadn't done much research about the game. I knew we were playing Wolves, and that was about it. And I knew that we were Villa, and that Nakamba wasn't playing. And then I heard Neves isn't playing, Jimenez isn't playing, and I thought, oh, I've just said 2-1 Wolves. That might not be the correct score. Little do I know a lot.
You were. But basically, you could get yourself a job on Soccer Saturday. No research required. Just go for those gut opinions, and the punditry career is yours. But we'll try and delve a little deeper into what happened on Saturday. I mean, you mentioned Ashley Young there. It was what can be only described as an unfortunate own goal. For me, I think we said before, sums up. He's not a left back. He's having to play there because of, well, when Dejan goes down, we haven't got anybody else really to play left back. And we've had a discussion about Christian before, whether we blood him. And we'll talk about Christian a bit later in the context of what was going on or not going on in terms of the bench. But you would have to think left back is there in terms of on that list, on the dressing room wall or the manager's office for the summer, things to do list. Take the rubbish out, do the gardening, do the weeding, find a left back. I mean, we've got Dejan. When he's fit, you think he's first choice, but it's those games whereby you need to be able to have that strength and depth. And Ashley Young's best contribution, to be fair to him, and we'll come on to the recipient of this pass a bit later on, but he played a beautiful through ball to Wally Watkins and cut open Wolves. One-on-one opportunity for Watkins. So that's clearly where Young, if he is going to play, is going to have his best benefit for the team. Got to pass on him, but you know, at left back, you know, it's kind of still gets the opportunity to do that because obviously he was playing left back and he did that pass. But imagine if he was in the middle, more opportunity to do that. I mean, that's real and realistically where you see Young in this squad rather than left back. But yeah, I mean, in terms of, we said he's not a left back. He's been made to play left back. Talks about the slip and slide in terms of the first goal. It's a struggle to find any more words that best describe it the way you did. But it's you can have the best tactical game plan, and you know we'll come on to our game plan in a moment. But you can't really legislate for that comedy defending for the first goal. No manager in the world is going to send their players out to go, basically, just fall on your ass, all of you, in a row, after 5 seconds of each other, and we'll basically goad the opposition into scoring. I mean, that, you know, you can't really legislate for that, but it did, well, it set the tone, really. Well, it set the tone for what happened about 20 minutes later with the own goal. But we'll raise it in terms of Gerrard made comments after the game where basically along the lines of, we didn't turn up for 70 minutes. It's not the first time he's made similar comments after games. Either didn't turn up in the first half or we didn't turn up in the second half. And we've touched upon it before about the 90 minutes performance. It's been elusive under Gerrard. There's a couple of occasions where I think Southampton, arguably home game, you could say, was one of the closest leads away. I mean, there was periods in that game where Leeds and Southampton were on top, but we're looking in the Gerrard era, those are nearer the top of the list. So on the one hand, you've got a situation whereby the same thing's happening every week, or nearly every week, and the problem has been identified. We're not playing for 90 minutes, but the same thing keeps happening. But then you see on the pitch, you just mentioned there, in terms of the defence, just basically like it's ice skating for the first time. Gerrard's fault, players' fault. Gerrard says basically, if you're not bucking up your ideas, you're off in the summer. He said that repeatedly over the last few weeks. Hasn't really worked because it's still happening. Is it a situation? I mean, we picked Ashley Young there. It could have been 3 or 4 others in terms of this team. Is it that Gerrard's methods are not right for this for the Premier League? Or is it that he just hasn't got the right players, and that when, perhaps, to not wish to be disrespectful to some of the players, we get better players, we'll get better results? Because it was similar in terms of Rangers. There was a high turnover of players when he was at Rangers. Literally built the team in terms of, there were a few trial and errors in terms of players being discarded. But once he got the players that he thought were good enough, they went on and won the league. I mean, I'm not saying we'll win the league next year, although your predictions for next season probably will say that. So, Gerrard, players, bit of both. Is it the situation because we haven't really got much to play for? Naturally, performances are going to be a bit down. Bit of everything.
I think, first of all, the only reason it doesn't happen every week that we don't play for the whole 90 minutes is because we have international breaks.
Yep.
And that really says it all. I think it's the players. I don't think it is Gerrard. Gerrard came in, he got them motivated, he got them winning matches with that 4-3-2-1. Yes, that went a little bit stale for a period. And then we changed to the 4-3-1-2 and it picked up. He got Coutinho motivated. I think a couple of the better teams are finding him out. Wolves sat 2 players deep in front of the back 4 so that Coutinho couldn't do anything. And every time Dejan or Coutinho got the ball, they quickly played it to the danger men for them. I think the problem is very much the players aren't good enough, really. When you look at it, we spoke previously about, have we got a better team now than we did last season under Gerrard, the 7-2 win against Liverpool. And I do believe that we have a better team now. When you look at it man for man, including Coutinho and Grealish. Coutinho's a world-class player compared to Grealish, and I don't mean to be horrible to Grealish fanboys or fans there. I'd have him back in a heartbeat. But Gerrard definitely needs to. I think he sent a shock through the squad when he brought in Digne and Coutinho, and it gave them a lift straight away. But we need to bring other players in. Callum Chambers is a player we brought in because of his experience and because of his winning mentality, doing quite well at Arsenal, winning a few trophies. And we did well with Chambers in the team. Conce has come back in and won his place. And I mentioned on my recording, I'm one of those fans who feels that if a player has to be dropped from the team because of injury or illness, or suspension, they shouldn't automatically come back in when they're fit. As with Chambers, he hasn't done that. Conce has kept his place in the team because he's played quite well, bar the roller skates on his boots this weekend for the first goal. But we definitely need that higher calibre of players. We've shown that by having them in the team that we are a better outfit. I don't think Gerrard is to blame, as I say, not because I love him and I love his accent and he gave me a thumbs up and we're best friends or anything, and because he plays Danny Ings,
But because you look at the stats, won 8, drawn 2, lost 8. Well, might be lost 9 now. But he still won a high proportion of games there. Okay, he's also lost the high proportion. But it's like when you see these teams that draw 54 games in a season, all of their fans would always say, if only we won a few of those and we lost a few of those, we'd have more points on the board. You want more of a definitive result. And I appreciate that a draw is more of a morale booster than a narrow defeat to a Man City or whatnot, because you're actually taking something from the game. But the amount of games we've won, the types of teams that we're beating as well, the teams that we have drawn against, they should all be seen as positives, really, because we're starting to separate from that lower pack. It's the ones that are above us that are just that little bit out of reach at the moment. It's very much like, it's going to sound daft, the Michelangelo painting on the Sistine Chapel. You've got that little bit between them until you actually, you're touching the face of God type of thing. And we're not quite there yet. But with the right signings and being brutal with player sales, we could be challenging next season for Europe. I've seen enough from what Gerrard and Bale and McAllister and that have brought to the team to think that we can be challenging for that top 8 next season. Bit of a spoiler, obviously, for our Premier League predictions next year. But there's nothing that I've seen that makes me think that we're going to be pulling an Everton, and going the wrong way down a slippery slope. What about you? What are you thinking?
I'll touch upon the numbers that you raised there in terms of 8 wins, 2 draws, 9 defeats. If, spoiler alert, we may be 1 or 2 games out, but that's roughly the Gerrard record. So 19 games, half a season. Maths tells me that record gets you 26 points. Double it, 52, full season.
Yeah.
It's about 10th, 9th, maybe. On 8th on a good year, perhaps. Where are we in the league now? About 10th?
Yeah, you have a fully fit firing striker like a Danny Ings, or if you bring somebody better in, which is what we should be looking to do for every position that there is, and with a bit of luck with injuries and whatnot, then why can't we be pushing on? There's been links with Abraham again, and players like Alan St Maximin, Calvin Phillips. What great players for us to be linked with. Will we attract them all? I don't know. Will we have the money to attract them all? I really don't know. I don't do the finances at the Villa. But if we can bring in a couple of those players, like we said previously, I really do feel that Phillips and Coutinho would make a massive difference to us next year and would help us really knock on the door and be, getting a foot in at times for those European spaces.
Yeah, I think that is the quality of player we're going to have. Whether we can attract them is one thing. But in terms of if we want to jump that gap, I think that is the type of quality we're going to need to get. In terms of, you mentioned the fact that teams above us this season, we've won 1 game against anybody above us. I think we've drawn 1, maybe, in terms of, from what I can remember. So as you said, the gap between us and the teams above us who we're trying to catch is pretty big, in terms of those results demonstrate it, really. And in terms of Wolves, were probably, in terms of position, closest to us. And we mentioned West Ham kind of sailed past us in the last few years. Wolves were in Europe a couple of seasons ago, and they are in the hunt to be back there. They've done a double over this season. So I think you'd have to say currently they're better than us. I think you have to, the results and where they are in the table demonstrates that. But it's a mid-table side doing mid-table things. And as we touched upon before, Dean Smith went because, we were flirting near the bottom and the board didn't want to risk us being dragged into a relegation fight. But I think if you would have asked the board. Could Dean Smith turn it around to get us 10th? Dean Smith said after he went, he thought I could have got us 10th, which, yeah, maybe. I'm not going to say that I was beyond the realms of possibility and that, it was a ridiculous comment. But as we said before, 10th, that's not the target for this team from our owners. They don't want 10th. They want Europe. And at the moment, we're 10th because we got a team who are probably good enough to come 10th based on the numbers. I mean, I don't think, the record between the teams who are above us is pretty poor. So that's kind of quite stark. But I don't think this is an underachieving team when you look at it in the whole. I think we're rough at the start of the season. I had us coming around here. We're around here. I mean, it's a bit disappointing. The season may taper off a little bit, but we are where we are. And I think it's about right. I mean, Everton, you mentioned that kind of the horror story. You'd say underperformed. I mean, you could have an argument as to whether they have, but they have got players. They're technically not even in the relegation zone yet, I don't think, currently at time recording, but everyone's talking as if they're going down, mainly because they listened to our Premier League preview, spoiler alert. Go listen to us talking about Everton and our thoughts on that. But that's an example of a team who I'd say underachieving. I mean, some teams at the bottom, you're like, yeah, you can see why they're at the bottom. Villa, yeah, we're in the mid. And talking about in terms of some of the players needing to improve in some of those positions, touch upon Danny Ings maybe as somebody, if you can get him fit in the summer with a system with Ollie Watkins. And that brings us back after our casual stroll through other matters to Saturday, where the expectation was that would be, you mentioned the change in tactical system that we've had under Gerrard recently. The expectation was Ings and Watkins would be playing together up front in the 4-3-1-2. Didn't happen because of Danny Ings' partner giving birth, so Ings didn't play. So we switched the system.
You didn't tell me.
Well, it didn't tell me based on my preview when I said he was going to play. So, I mean, I think we'll be having words with the communications officer. But
I'll be having words with you.
Yeah, definitely. Right. But instead of, we didn't still play two up front, from what I could see, one up front, Ollie Watkins. Bailey comes in to play instead of Buendia compared to the team that started against Arsenal. So it looks like in terms of Gerrard's preferred shape is one up front. No, Gerrard's, in terms of that's his preferred shape. That's his default shape, as it were. But when Ings and Watkins are both available, he wants them both in the team, so they're going to play together. If it does end up a scenario whereby they're both still at the club in the summer, then you'd anticipate the two up front system is going to carry on, or at least we're going to attempt to carry on at the start of next season. But if for any reason Ings goes and you got Watkins up front, in terms of if we're playing at one up front, I know, pretty shocking. Well, based on Saturday, you might be more shocked because the point I'm going to come on to in terms of Ollie Watkins, 3 chances, if you include in a penalty, what he puts away, 2 one-on-one situations. I mean, Jose Sarr, one of the signings of the season in the Premier League, I'd say. Great goalkeeper.
Yeah.
If you are chasing down those European places whereby against Wolves, you're not going to get many chances against teams who are kind of battling for you. Somebody clinical up front takes one of those chances. I mean, if you're doing 2 + 2 is 5 or 1 + 1 is 2, then that gets you a 2-2 draw if he puts one of them away. I mean, in terms of obviously the rest of the game probably doesn't pan out in a way it did. If that goal goes in, kind of you can go through a whole fun game. But mentioned in terms of having to improve the squad in terms of players if you want to get into that European competition. I mean, you mentioned Calvert-Lewin there and those players you're going through. Is he better than Watkins? Is he better than Ings?
I think there's a couple of players at Everton, to be honest with you, who'd walk into our first team on their day. Calvert-Lewin on his day would be one of them. He's the second best English striker in the league on his day.
Yep, went fit.
Yeah, the only person to rival him really would be a Tammy Abrahams, because Tammy Abrahams is banging in goals in a notoriously hard league to score goals.
Yep.
I think Richarlison gets into the team as well. I know he's a bit of a prick, but he's one of those players that sometimes you want in your team because he's got moment. He's a little bit like a poor man's Cantona in that he's a bit of a dick, you know.
Yeah, well, he's kind of. I think in terms. Yeah, he's basically the equivalent of when Cantona was still playing at Man United. If Richarlison was outside, kind of with an upturned hat, you know, trying to get some loose change. That's how much of a poor man comparison to Cantona. But I get your point, you know, in terms of Maverick. But I'd say, the difference from, and you know, I'll put this as a disclaimer. I don't spend my time at Everton's training ground. But kind of the stories you hear in terms of Cantona's work ethic, kind of on the training ground, you know, the cliche first one there, last one out, influence in terms of the younger players. Don't tend to hear too many similar stories in relation to Richarlison. I get what you mean in terms of you sometimes need a little bit of difference, you know, a little bit of Maverick unpredictability. But Calvert-Lewin, I agree with you in terms of he'd walk into Villa's team. Richarlison, jury's out for me, but I know what you mean. You need somebody with that spark, that little bit of X factor.
Yeah, you know, I think either of them put that Ollie Watkins chance away, particularly the one which Ashley Young played that through ball to, because they either slot it in first time or they go round the goalkeeper with their pace. I think, and I honestly believe Danny Ings puts that away, especially after how he's been playing recently. I think any Villa fan would probably say that if you had Watkins or Ings in a one-on-one situation, you'd want Danny Ings to be the one with the ball at his feet rather than Ollie Watkins. He's a lot more composed. He's done it over a number of years as well. Yeah, I mean, he was more Wally Hopkins, wasn't it, than Ollie Watkins?
It was,
that finish. But it's definitely somewhere where we need. I don't think it's definitely somewhere actually that we need to improve in regards to strikers. We've got, as I say, two of the best strikers in the Premier League. When you look at two top class strikers that are in the team playing together, I maintain that from the start of the season. We've potentially got the best two number nines in the league, because there's some that could be by default. There's teams that don't have two number nines. You know, look, I said Arsenal at the start of the season, Lacazette on form and Aubameyang on form would be better, but Aubameyang's left now. You know, you look at Liverpool have got an abundance of talent, but and Chelsea as well, Havertz and Lukaku when they're on form. But apart from that, really, when you look at out and out strikers, but if you can improve it, then definitely you do. And those chances that go narrowly wide creep inside the far post. A player who I'd potentially look at, and I know before I even say his name that you're going to laugh your head off and you're going to quit the podcast. But honestly, brutally honest,
I'm looking forward to this.
And I'm being deadly serious now. I don't think necessarily he's not a better player than Ings and Watkins. So I'm backtracking a little bit, but he's a very good finisher. And he's someone who could stick the ball in the net, could be a bit of a fox in the box for us if you've got another striker who does all the hard work. I'm just going to get to it and say it. If he stays fit and he's cheap enough, a Callum Wilson is a goal scorer.
I don't think that's a bad shout, actually. I mean, I was expecting
Thank God for that.
kind of Troy Deeney, kind of something like that. But no, I think, Wilson is the big thing, staying fit, and he can't, based on recent seasons, stay fit. But yeah, a fully fit Callum Wilson, squad player. I mean, you're looking in terms of, mentioned Calvert-Lewin. Do I think he'd come to Villa? Probably not. I'd have him, definitely. Wilson's kind of your backup, maybe plan, if he's available. If he's fit, he would be a good addition to the squad, I'd say. So I'd actually agree with you there. So maybe I spent too much time on my own being positive, and it's just kind of continued to wash over me in the subsequent podcast. But I do think in terms of, I get your point in terms of if you're just looking at two up front, who else do you compare? you'd say in terms of obviously Liverpool kind of play for three up front. Man City, well, technically written down on the piece of paper, the team sheet, it's three up front, but it's very fluid and they seem to be doing okay in terms of without those two up front. So, yeah, I think it comes back to if Gerrard wants to play two up front, then, yeah, that's kind of the standard. You got to be looking at who's better than Ings, who's better than Watkins to break into that. If we're playing kind of what you anticipate would be Gerrard's preferred formation if he had the players for it, or in his view had the players for it, it'd be one up front. And then you're looking at somebody like Calvert-Lewin, possibly Wilson, as you said. So it's the age-old debate. We've had it before. Do you fit the tactics for your players, or do you get the players for your tactics? At the moment, because of, we're near the end of the season and we can't go and buy anybody else, the tactics are fitting the players. In the summer, when we're looking forward to that transfer window already in terms of what's going to be happening, do we then go, look, we want to play the formation that Gerrard played when he first came. That's what we're doing. If you can't play in that formation, you're probably out the door. Players, you're coming in, you're playing that formation. If you don't play that formation, then taxis that way. We're not paying for the taxi for you. So in terms of the summer and those players coming in, then it's going to be interesting fitting it in for the formation and kind of those thoughts. And speaking of players who may or may not be in the manager's thoughts in the summer, in another delightful prediction from the preview episode on Friday, Morgan Sanson, I said we probably should be playing him, but if he hasn't played now, he's not going to play. Of course, he was in the starting lineup on Saturday. I know you've been a fan of getting Sanson into the team. How do you think he went on Saturday? Do you think he's done enough to keep his place in the team for Spurs?
Well, let me tell you, that's two predictions I got right in the last episode then, isn't it, by saying that he'd come in. Morgan Sanson, obviously, he got taken off, didn't he, for Dougie towards the end of the game. And they said that we had more of a hold on the ball when Douglas Luiz came in and other players came on. Maybe that's because Douglas Luiz has played more football recently. I was surprised, really, to see Sanson playing as an 8 and McGinn dropping into that DM role, though. I've mentioned that before. I don't think I'd do it again because he slipped over, didn't he, as well for the first one. Didn't
really work.
Didn't cover himself in glory. No. I'd stick with Sanson. I don't see a reason not to, though I'd either have him in for Ramsey, because I've mentioned before, Ramsey needs some sort of a break. He's not hitting the heights that he was a few months ago. His form's going to go up and down. So give the kid a rest. Douglas Luiz, I mentioned that if he's off, don't play him. If he isn't going to be signing a new contract and he's going to leave, then don't play him for the rest of the season. There's absolutely no need to. Go and give Tim a chance. Give Sanson, Ramsey and McGinn the chance, or try and maybe drop Buendia a little bit deeper if you absolutely have to, though I'm not really going to recommend any other positional changes to players because they don't tend to get down very well or work very well.
Nope.
Callum Chambers could come in as the DM with McGinn and Sanson and JJ as the two other midfielders, two of those three as the other midfielders. It's one of the, I'd stick with him, providing he's not going to leave. There's talk around the club that there's a fierce determination from Sanson to make a fist of his Villa career and to succeed with us, that he's a determined individual and that's what he wants to do. And those are the sorts of players that you want in the team. Yeah. We've seen him link well with players before. He's got that, you've mentioned, he's got that lovely diagonal pass towards the edge of the box. He linked quite well with Luke Dean against Leeds when he came on. The French connection there. But Luke Dean was helped settle into the club by Morgan Sanson. So they obviously get on quite well, or you'd think that they would. I'd stick with him, especially against Tottenham, because he can get stuck in and he can play a pass. And that's what you need against a good Spurs team. You need it against a rubbish Spurs team as well, to be honest with you. But yeah, he's done enough. He's done enough for me. He keeps Douglas Luiz out, especially if Douglas Luiz is going. The only other people I consider are Iro Egbenham, Chambers, or if he's fit and he is going to stay, Carney Chukwuemeka, but not if it's Ramsey and Chukwuemeka as the two central midfielders. That's probably a little bit naive to put two young players in to Premier League matches at the moment with such little experience between them.
Yeah, I think against Spurs, and you mentioned Spurs, so we'll seamlessly link this in now to the Spurs preview. The game Saturday evening, 5:30, live on Sky, or in your local drinking establishment or your local VPN connection. We won't tell. So in terms of Ramsey Chukwuemeka, a centre midfield of those two, whoever you play behind them, you'd assume against Spurs, that's a recipe for disaster, I'd say, in terms of switching to the Spurs perspective. They are in a good run of form currently. I mean, they smashed Newcastle 5-1 on Sunday. They were struggling a couple of months ago. I mean, there was talk about would Conte even make the end of the season. Lost away at Burnley. End of February, lost away at Middlesbrough in the FA Cup. Start of March. But yeah, they've turned it around, to be fair. And they are, at time of recording, their fourth. 2 games more played than Arsenal. So that's, anticipate that's going to be the battle for that 4th place European qualification. But yeah, not a team. Well, in terms of the form, they're not a team you want to be playing right now. In terms of our record against Spurs at Villa Park, definitely not the team you want to be playing right now. They've had a couple of signings. We mentioned ours in January, Dino Coutinho, a couple of players they brought in. One we were linked with, and then that mysteriously kind of disappeared, Ben Couture. Then I'll go his first name, Dejan, comes into centre midfield. He's done very well for Spurs. So, yeah, they are turning themselves around at the right time. And regular listeners of the show will remember when we played them at the new White Hart Stadium in October, and Nuno was still in charge. There was a real depression, even though he was only like 6 weeks into the season. I think they'd just been smashed by Arsenal in the North London derby. We had friend of the show, Buck, giving us the Spurs perspective. We got sucked into the Spurs a terrible kind of narrative, and we went and lost. Yeah, in terms of football, doesn't make sense a lot of the time. So the only way you can logically say Saturday we're going to get a result is basically they've been that good and we've been that bad that, yeah, stuff just happens that you can't explain. But yeah, in terms of, I was not enjoying watching Harry Kane and Son in full flow against Newcastle on Sunday. I mean, Kane didn't score, but kind of he still won man of the match for kind of his performance. So yeah, you don't want whoever we play in our back line. We touched upon kind of players who may play, so we'll pin our colours to the mast in a moment. But yeah, it's not a time for slip and slide with those playing up front. What are your thoughts on Spurs ahead of their visit to Villa Park on Saturday?
My thoughts from a Villa fan point of view are God save us all. I'm terrified of what the result could be. To be honest with you, I think that Spurs have hit a real purple patch, and they could obliterate us. They could beat us a 4-1, type of a result. Then again, I have that eternal optimism that, that positivity.
That's our budget for the year gone, folks, on special effects. Those of us watching on the YouTube channel, you've just witnessed the light bulb moment, quite literally.
Yeah. It's one, we're playing against a team who are doing very well at the moment, like we did against Southampton, and it's the Aston Villa way to go and beat that team. they're playing very well, aren't they? I don't think they're, from looking at them as a full team. Hugo Lloris is having a good season. He's not the goalkeeper that he was 2 or 3 years ago, but he's still a top-end goalkeeper.
Yep.
Matt Doherty has really found form recently, chipping in with goals and assists for Spurs. Ben Davies is doing very well as a left centre-back. Ryan Sessegnon's played quite a bit recently as a left wing-back, hasn't he? And they've got a decent defence, but I don't think it's the greatest. Saying that, watch them keep a clean sheet now. Their midfield central players, Bentancur has definitely improved them as a midfield outfit. He's a very class player, and you can see why we went after him. Heung-min Son loves playing against Aston Villa. Most attacking players do. They've got some sort of record when it comes to playing against us. Lukaku, look at him. Most goals against the team, Aston Villa. Heung-min Son, I wouldn't be surprised if it was as well. Harry Kane is the ultimate centre forward. He's not a striker. He's a centre forward. He's a modern day Alan Shearer in regards to the types of goals he can score, headers, close range. Those left-footed volleys he's been getting in recently from the right wing crosses have been amazing. He can score from outside the area, but apart from that, something he can do better than Shearer is he can play a pass and he can pick out his teammates. He's got a phenomenal amount of assists. Again, he's really clicked into life after a poor start to the season. But I really do feel that their key player could be Dejan Kulusevski down that right-hand side, especially if it's against Ashley Young. I do worry if Luca Din has still got the 2 bob bits and is unable to play, then Dejan could tear us a new bumhole down that side. I'd actually be more inclined to put Courtney Hawes there and just try and rough him up a little bit, win things in the air from those crossfield passes, be a little bit tighter. Courtney Hawes can play a pass as well. He's not going to be able to get up and down the wing like Ashley Young or Luca Din can do, but you probably need a little bit more stability at the back for the game. Tottenham are they're on fire at the moment, aren't they? So if you are naive in looking at them and thinking Tottenham haven't been very good this season, look at the last few performances. Like you say, that Newcastle 5-1 win was something else. The 4-0 win against Leeds, they were ferocious against them in the way that they played. And they've got a number of players who are scoring goals. Emerson Royale scores at the weekend. Yep. Steven Bergwijn's popped up with a few goals recently. Most notably, his late 2 goals against Leicester City in that 3-2 win. And what a win that was for them. But Spurs do have a rick in them. And that's where the positivity also comes from a little bit. The Burnley performance, where they lost 1-0. They've had a couple of other bad runs of form, but they're a decent team with a very good manager. So we're going to have to be at our absolute best against them. And for us to be at our absolute best, we need our absolute best players available and them all singing from the same hymn sheets.
Yep. I mean, that was one of the aspects of the Wolves game that we didn't touch upon too much when we were talking about Wolves earlier. It appeared to be a real lack of communication between the players, very individualistic in terms of each player focusing on themselves rather than kind of what we were meant to be doing shape-wise or tactically wise or staying on your feet wise instead of falling over. But yeah, I agree. That's going to be a key battleground for Villa on Saturday. Even if we have our best players available, tactical game plan has to be right. And if we don't stick to it, we are in a whole heap of trouble, I think, in terms of we said. But speaking of tactical game plan then, I mean, we touched upon it earlier. Assuming everybody's fit, who is realistically in the running to be fit, 4-3-1-2? 4-3-2-1?
4-3-1-2.
I think in terms of, gives you that outlet up front. Ings and Watkins. I mean, you'd assume that Spurs will be playing three at the back as they have been recently, kind of with, I suppose you could call it, the two wing backs or kind of a midfield four. I mean, it's very free flowing in terms of kind of going forwards, which would be something to watch out for. But yeah, I think in terms of playing one up front against that back three, they got a Rickett in them, I agree, but I don't think we're going to be getting much change if we're just playing one up front. So tactical. So yeah, I'd go, if everybody's fit, I'd go with you 4-3-1-2. I mean, we talked about some of the players who may be playing earlier when we were kind of linking it in. You'd assume Coutinho would play in the one in that role, then a midfield three. I mean, you're looking at it in terms of, if Nakamba's, it's a difficult one. If Nakamba is fit, would you play Nakamba? Bearing in mind, you might be physically fit, but not match fit. And Spurs, if they turn up, are going to run us ragged. Or do you leave him on the bench if he's fit? And then maybe see how the game's going. And if it is kind of, we're getting pummeled, you may as well bring him on anyway, because that ship sailed. Is this a game you throw him straight into, or do you wait? And I mean, we haven't got many kind fixtures before the end of the season, but do you wait a week or two, or is this the game you throw him in there and show, if you want to be here in the summer, you got to step up in these games, off you go?
To contradict what I said earlier about players coming back from injury and getting straight back into the team, because contradicting our own opinions is what we like to do here on Talk of the Trinity.
Yep. You're welcome.
I'd start him. If he can play an hour or 75 minutes, I'd start him. It gives you that solid base. He was the best player of the Gerrard era up until he got injured, and he's probably still is. When you look at that bit of form, I think the only person who really rivals him is Matty Cash, who's been phenomenal in regards to consistency. I'd have marvellous Nakamba. I think the midfield, though, is such a tough call because JJ is potentially screaming out for a rest, as we touched upon. John McGinn hasn't hit the heights that we know that he can hit. Is it time to show that actually he isn't undroppable, or would it have a detrimental effect like Mings being dropped against West Ham did?
Yep. I mean, we run a poll on John McGinn on our Twitter page at Talk Trinity a week, 10 days ago, in terms of asking the fans to rate his season out of 10. And the majority voted for kind of 6 to 8 out of 10. You'd say 6/7, probably, for me. So, yeah, he is up and down in terms of form. When he's on, and it's that, as you say, do you play somebody because you know that when they do hit the form, that they're one of the best players on the team, or do you look at it and go, well, maybe we do need to send a message? I mean, it'd be tricky in terms of, we mentioned he played number 6 on Saturday, didn't do particularly well. I think it's tricky because, well, playing for Scotland as a number 10 during international week, and then coming back into, a derby game in a different position, perhaps with a different formation than would have been anticipated in the build-up. It's a tricky one. I mean, I think we had to try it, in terms of just to see if he could do it. Maybe you might repeat the experiment against maybe Norwich at home rather than Tottenham at home. But yeah, it demonstrates the importance of, well, in this squad of players, it demonstrates the importance of Nakamba to the system in terms of looking maybe for top 8 or, eventually top 4. It demonstrates the importance of getting another quality defensive midfielder to play that role, I think. And in terms of, I would agree with you about Nakamba. If he's fit for 75 minutes, I would play him because I think you've almost got no choice in terms of who else you're playing in terms of that role. McGinn, probably not. I don't think he'll be putting his hand up to go into that role again on Saturday. Luiz, maybe is he going to maybe want to be a bit too fancy in terms of this opponent, maybe not. Then yeah, if you got Sanson, probably wouldn't play him there either. Really, if you're gonna play Sanson in this team, and I think we mentioned earlier, you'd maybe put you on the spot again in a second, but you'd probably play him. I think you need to, if you're going to play him, you need to give him the opportunity to do what he does best. And against Spurs, I think it's going to be having more of an offensive responsibility rather than worrying about him being the guy who's got to get his foot in for his last minute gasp tackles. And if Nakamba's fit, you play him. If he's not fit, then, well, yeah, we've got some head scratching to do, I think, if he's not fit. But assuming they're all fit, I'd probably go Nakamba at that base. I'd play Sanson. I'd play him again. For me, I'd play that free. Would that be the same for you, or are you joining the brigade of fans who think McGinn maybe needs to have a rest, be taught a lesson, anything in between, and put him on the bench?
I agree completely, obviously, about Marcus Nakamba. As you agreed with me, so then I obviously agree with you. So yep. Nakamba's in. Sanson is in for me as well on that sort of left central midfield side of the pitch. I think that with him, he's proper number 8. He'll get forward and back, so he will help out defensively, but he'll also push forward as well. And on that right side of the pitch, I am very sorry. And once again, to contradict myself, but hoping that he does sign a new contract, I'd actually have Douglas Luiz as a number 8, because Douglas Luiz's best position is as a number 8. He can get back and help defend and cover because he's done that a lot this season. But if you get him on the ball and he can play a pass through, then that's going to help us. You know, he's not afraid to have a long shot. I realise that McGinn isn't. We love Qatar Liam's expression of him being like a little wind-up McDonald's toy that before he lets rip. You know, and he scores quite a few cracking goals as well. However, I think W. Luiz and Matty Cash have got quite a nice little link-up when they play together. We've seen the through balls that W. Luiz can play. Notably, Man United away, that one for Ollie Watkins was one of the passes of the season before Watkins' first touch let him down in a one-on-one v Varane. So I think against a team like Tottenham, where you need to be a bit industrious, you know, you need to put your tackles in, you need to get back and defend, but then you also need those little bits of quality to play the ball through. Luiz just pips McGinn for me. And then if McGinn comes on, he's got a point to prove. You know, you can then bring McGinn on into an 8. You can bring him on into a 10, potentially as well, unless you want to go for that double right back again, which hopefully we never see ever again. And Ramsey, again, being on the bench, hopefully that gives him a bit of a kick up the arse, not because he needs one. I think he's rested, but hopefully it rejuvenates him more than anything else, so that if he comes on, he can get back to being that box-to-box midfielder, racing forward, getting onto the Coutinho or Buendia passes and firing home for us like he did against Leeds at home.
Yep. And mentioned it earlier in terms of the Konsa Chambers debate at centre-back. You're assuming if he's fit, it's going to be Harry Kane. I say leading the line, but as you mentioned, you know, kind of a centre forward rather than a striker, kind of drops in, drops out wide, kind of all over that. I'd say attacking third, but more in just the attacking half, really, in terms of what Kane does. But assuming Kane, Son are going to be playing for Spurs, kind of part of the front three, Konsa or Chambers, do you think is going to be best suited to deal with that threat? We're assuming Mings is going to play. You know, I think if he's fit, you know, kind of, I don't think we'll, famous last words again, based on some of the predictions before last week's game. But if Mings is fit, you'd assume he plays. So who do you think slots or should slot alongside him?
I'd go with Chambers at the moment. I think, you know, we've lost a couple of games now with Konsa in the team. So maybe it's time to put Chambers back in. He doesn't automatically get back in after recovering from injury or illness. he played very well when he was there alongside Mings. They got a bit of an understanding. Ezri Konsa is a very good defender. I'm really sorry. I'm going to prepare the house, for the onslaught because.
But you'll be preparing the house to play left back, I think, based on if Luca Digne isn't fit.
Well, yeah, but I'm fed up of having cabbages and tomatoes thrown at the front of my property. I'll go with Chambers and Mings there with Konsa on the bench. As I said before, it's 3 players who are first choice at the moment. It's not a first choice 2. So whichever ones you go with, you feel comfortable with them at the heart of your defence. So you should do. Don't get me wrong, we can improve on them in the summer. And if a Pau Torres came available, has been linked previously, and I don't think we would get him, but if he came available, bite your hand off, he moves them all out of the way.
Yep.
And fullback-wise, you've got to have Matty Cash at right back, and you hope that Luca Digne is fit enough on the left. I think in regards to the Harry Kane, it's not only having your best 2 centre-backs or your 2 centre-backs that you're most comfortable with at the moment. You've got to have a relentless defensive midfielder so that when Kane does drop, and instead of pulling out your centre-backs to go and mark him, you get that relentless Nakamba, brother of marvellous Nakamba, to go and follow him around the pitch and kick lumps out of him. As soon as he gets the ball deep and looks to go and play a pass, you need Nakamba on him straight away, making life really difficult for him and unsettling him.
Yep, and that's going to be, we talked about it earlier. If he's fit, that's going to be the key thing, because he is going to, even if he's only fit for 60, 75 minutes, it's going to be like 100 minutes in terms of that relentless energy he's going to have to bring to keep Kane in check. So that'll be certainly an interesting one to watch out for in terms of the team sheet. And speaking of interesting, we often focus on the starting 11 because that's where all, the initial action happens and where the debates about who should be playing and who's not. But inevitably, those who don't play may be on the bench. And one of the interesting quirks, shall we say, of Saturday against Wolves just gone is that we had 2 goalies on the bench. Me personally, I'll go first. I don't understand why you put 2 goalies on the bench. I mean, in terms of, I know the youth team played the night before. For me, especially because it was a derby game, kind of they have a unique atmosphere about them. I mean, the youth team lost 4-1. So it's like in terms of, we haven't got our best youth team available because some of our better youth players are on loan. So for me, I would have said, you could make a choice of 3 or 4, maybe, who were in the squad for that youth team game. Go. So you're not playing on Friday. Get yourself in the squad for the game on Saturday where Wolves, you might not play. But that experience of being around the match day squad for the first team, I think would have been better use of kind of our resources and experience than having 2 goalies on the bench. Because the chances of needing to replace your goalie twice in a game, I can't recall off the top of my head having ever seen that happen. Whereas you could have had a situation whereby, and funnily enough, it did kind of happen in this game, 5 minutes to go, chasing a goal. We've talked about it off air. You got Brad Young on the bench. Is he your future of Villa up front? Maybe, maybe not, but he's a striker, There was more chance of that happening in the game script, if you may want to call it that or not, I think the case may be, of requiring a young player to do that than having 2 goalies. So I hope, regardless of what our starting 11 is on Saturday against Spurs, we might have the team repeated, but I hope we don't see that bench repeated in terms of 2 goalies. Well, what were your thoughts when you saw that, Will?
It was definite naivety, wasn't it, from the coaching staff's part? Okay, it's unfortunate that Carney Chukwuemeka's got injured in the warm-up, and that's why Sinisalo was put onto the bench as a late replacement. But as you say, you'd have hoped that an O'Reilly or a Crescent or a Young or one of the other players, Feeney, anybody else, that they'd have said, look, I know you played last night, but we'd like you to come with the squad as well. You may get put onto the bench. Chances are you're not going to play. But again, it's invaluable experience being around the first team squad, seeing what, and also appreciating that what Gerrard is saying to the first team is being cascaded down as a club philosophy, you know, and realising, oh, actually, when I do play for the under-23s and Mark Harrison or whomever it is says, this is what we're playing and we're playing this way because the first team do, you've got proof that that is actually correct. So you're very much like, oh, okay. And also, you know, it's going to be a lot more seamless for you to transition into that first team because of tactics and whatnot. Anybody, any outfield player from the age of 16 upwards who was available that you thought, yeah, one day they'll play for the Villa, could have been in that match day squad. Any two or three, you know, it could have been a 16-year-old kid who's nobody's really heard of, can't think of any off the top of my head at the moment, or one that's just come back from injury or is nearly back from injury that you're thinking, okay, they could be a player going forward that could have come along, had a few more minutes of training, and then they end up on the bench. And you've got that option, as you say, even if it's a case of Watkins scores, pulls it back to 2-1 from the penalty spot, and then it's right, we're going to go and attack now. Mr. Striker, Brad Young or somebody else, we've only got 5 minutes plus injury time. Keep going on. Go and see what you can do for us because the players on the pitch obviously aren't doing it. Or let's just get another body further up. And if we lose 3-1, well, you know, we went for it and we gambled. You can't really complain. So I agree. I never want to see 2 goalies on the bench again. I don't want to see 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 or 9 goalies on the bench. I only want to see 1 goalie on the bench. And you want to see a lot more of the youth. The youth players being on the bench as well gives the fans something to look forward to, doesn't it? And it gives them something to invest in. It also highlights and sheds a light more on those youth teams that we've got, gets them a bit more support when you find out about them. So all in all, it has a massive positive effect on the club as a whole, not just on that one individual who gets to sit on a bench next to Courtney Hawes, you know, on a match day.
Yep. And hopefully we won't see, as you said, those scenes repeated again. But speaking of things for the fans to invest in, you have just invested in the last hour or so listening to this podcast, which we will have to bring to an end now that we have set the Villa world to rights, and hopefully the form book goes out of the window on Saturday rather than your TV in terms of watching events unfold at Villa Park. But whilst you're on the way to retrieve whatever item you might have thrown out the window, take a look at our Twitter page at Talk Trinity for all the build up to the game. No doubt we'll put our starting lineup predictions on there for your viewing pleasure and our score predictions, and you can let us know what you think in respect to that. You can check out our YouTube channel at it's Talk of the Trinity. You know, no at for YouTube. But what is there is our Premier League predictor, as we mentioned at the start of the podcast, and also our past interviews, episodes during the course of the season. So if there's any that have caught your eye or you want to have a listen to or watch again, then they're all there for your viewing pleasure. In terms of audio pleasure, you can check us out on our audio channels: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, Deezer, Weezer, some other ones. We're also on Fan Hub as well. So plenty of Villa-based content to keep you going until match day and beyond, until the inevitable review show that we'll do in respect to Spurs. Hopefully we'll have a smile on our face. Hopefully we'll have positive Baz becoming more of a fixture in the Talk of the Trinity world, or maybe not. But speaking of things which are a fixture in the Talk of the Trinity world, I'll pass you over to Mr. Talk of the Trinity himself, Will Forrest, for his final thoughts. But from me, thanks for listening and hope you enjoy the game on Saturday.
Before I give you my final thoughts, our eagle-eyed viewers and our big-eared listeners will note that we haven't given a prediction score prediction for the game.
Oh, I didn't want to.
I thought you were rushing a little bit. Yeah, that's all. That's all, folks.
No,
wrap it up.
Go on then. Let's throw it in there. I mean, I kind of like a traumatic experience buried it to the back of my mind. 3-1 Spurs.
Oh, 3-0 Villa. No, I'm joking. No. 2-1 Spurs.
There we go. Well, on that optimistic note to end, you can see why we tried to avoid it. But yeah we'll order will be restored, and we'll have a more leisurely exit out of this podcast now. Take 2.
Yeah, I was going to say 3-1 Spurs, but I didn't want to out-neg or be on a par with Baz. But if you do like Will and Baz and Will being on a par, then definitely check out those videos. One in particular that you may want to check out, whether you're a Villa fan or not, is the Premier League Predictor, especially with Wednesday night's relegation game between Burnley and Everton coming up. I ain't going to plug it for anybody else. Friend of the show, Joe, versus friend of the show, Pete. I want a draw because of that. There we are. But as per usual, cheers, Tar. Thank you very much. I'm Villa till I die. Contrary to popular belief, so is he. Up the Villa.